How you feeling?
I'm humbled because I've been an athlete pretty much as long as I can remember. I played little league football. My first love was baseball, t-ball. Um, Played all the way up until I was a little too old for Dixie Youth, and after that, I had a coach move away. My baseball coach, like he was a really cool guy, um, and he used to pick me up from my grandma's house to take me to practice. Cause times I get in trouble, I wasn't always a good kid. If I get in trouble, or whatever, I still be allowed to go to practice. Grandma was like, "I ain't taking you," so coach would come by and get me. And I played every position on the baseball field except catcher. That wasn't about to happen. Now, I wasn't about to get behind that bat because as a pitcher, I knew how fast I used to throw that ball. So that wasn't happening. But I got to high school, or in middle school. I did not play football in middle school. I played basketball in middle school. And then in high school, I decided to play football. And they would pick us up from 8th grade and bus us to the high school. And that's when my weightlifting started in 8th grade. And I stopped growing in like 6th grade, so I wasn't tall as other kids, and I wasn't as fast as the other kids. But when I got into weightlifting, I can remember looking in my grandma's mirror in her bedroom and seeing like my chest grow, like turning to the side and just seeing a little now what I know is called hypertrophy. Okay, so I've seen that grow, and that was super exciting, and I just kind of got, like, I love that feeling. My older cousins, went to Swanson High School, Chris and Steven, and they had a weight bench at their house, and I just loved to go over there and lift weights. And so that was my start of learning to love the gym life. I ran track in high school, played football, I played basketball, and then my junior and senior year, basketball got swapped out for wrestling because pretty much our entire starting 11 on defense for football was the wrestling team. And they wanted me a part of that, and wrestling season's right after football season, so we was already in shape, so we just transitioned right on over. My junior year, we made it to state, finished second. My senior year, we were undefeated and won state. I thought we were going to win a championship in football because we were like that Friday Night Lights type of town. Swansea High football champions. I want to say a couple times in the 80s, maybe 3 times in the 80s, 91, 92, and 93 back to back. I know a lot of you guys remember that time at Swansea. And I just knew that I was going to be a champion. And somehow I didn't bring my ring today, but I still was able to achieve that championship status at Swansea High School, even though it didn't happen the way I thought it was going to happen. But years later down the road, I'm still playing basketball. I'm still lifting weights in the house. I would always lift weights as I got into weightlifting. Coach Evans used to call me the genetic freak because what I know now, I have really, really good genetics, and you can see most of the muscles in my body, and a lot of these I definitely still need to work on and improve, and especially for my next competitive venture that I'm looking at getting into. So with me wrestling in high school and me still wanting to be an athlete, understanding that in college nobody's looking for a guy that's 5'4", 150 pounds that's running the 4.8 and the 40. Like I said, I wasn't fast, whatever. But being at the store that I was at selling TVs or whatever, we used to sell Dish Network whenever that was around. And flipping through the channels, I came across Versus, which eventually was bought up by the UFC. I didn't even know what the UFC was when I started getting into mixed martial arts. But watching Versus, like I would record it on a Dish Network box. Every time I saw some type of MMA, I would record it. So I would actually get to work early. I used to sell TV, so I'd actually get to work early just so I could watch the fights that I recorded on the box. And then some days I'd have them on all the TVs in the store, up until we got our first customers. And then I was, because sometimes it gets a little gory or whatnot. And I was like, man, I got to try to find me a gym. But everything that I was hearing was California, 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 California. But one day, I was sitting there watching the little TV by itself, not spread all around the store, and a guy came in. He said, my buddy does that. He does it in Lexington. I turned around like, where? Like, where? Like, I was, where? And he told me, he wasn't sure. It was off 378. I got off work that day, and I drove. I drove 3 hours trying to find this gym. Couldn't find it, okay? So some time went by, and a guy walked into the store, and he had on Muay Thai shorts. And it was like, hey, what do you train at? Because I recognized those shorts, like those are definitely fight shorts, and nobody just walks around in Thai trunks that doesn't train Muay Thai or some type of martial arts. Unless nobody's that big of a fan. Like Muay Thai shorts, if you know them, they're definitely not a fashion statement, okay? So I got with him. He gave me the address. I went to the school. Miss Tanya Mills gave me a card for a free class and told me when to come back to try the MMA class. I tried the class, met Tim Goodwin. He used to wrestle in high school also, and he ended up putting me in the rear naked choke. I never knew what a rear naked choke was. I didn't know to protect my choke, but whatever. It's like, man, what was that? Like that was, like it was not comfortable, but it was cool at the same time. Like I wanted to learn what he did. And at that time, Miss Tanya, she told me how much the classes were, and we were actually in a recession during this time. This was 2008, 2009, and I definitely could not afford the classes at that time. With us being in a recession, selling TVs, the job that I was at was commission-based only, and nobody needed a TV in a recession, okay? So anyway, I called my mama, told her what was going on, and she's like, baby, if you want to do it that bad, you'll find a way, okay? So, that's when my cycle of skipping around on car payments and car insurance and cell phone got cut off a couple of times. And to be truthfully honest, I was coming home to Columbia from Columbia Martial Arts and Fitness one day, and I didn't have on my seatbelt. And I was probably maybe less than a mile away from my house. And a police officer pulled me over. And because I didn't have on my seatbelt. And I went to jail that day because I had a suspended license because I haven't paid my car insurance for over a year. And I went to jail. Went over to what they call it? Where was it? Alvarez Glen. And when they put me in the cell, some guy apparently who had been in there before wrote "pray" on the wall or on the side of the water fountain, I think it was. And I wasn't in there over 24. I wasn't in there a long time at all. Okay, I was supposed to get out at 8 o'clock that next day, and it seemed like it took 3 days for 8 o'clock to come. Okay, I didn't get no sleep. I woke up probably about 10 times thinking, okay, it must be 8. Okay, it must be 8. So finally they called my name, like, yes, I'm about to get out of here. It was 4 in the morning. And they moved me into this other cell. If you've been to jail, you know how it goes. You go from this cell to another holding spot, leave that holding spot, go to another holding spot. But in that first holding spot, I went and I sat down. And it was just me and another guy in there. And then eventually the room started to fill up with all these other guys. And they're like, hey, man, what's going on, man? I ain't seen you in a long time, man. What you here for? I'm like, man, y'all do this all the time? Like, this is okay with y'all? Like, really? But anyway, they got so crowded that I kind of needed to move over and make some space. And when I moved over and put my hand down, right here on the bench, somebody had scraped out Solo. Promise, I'm not making this up. So the message that I got from that trip, besides paying my car insurance, okay, was pray Solo. And Shortly after that's when I went pro as a martial artist. Okay, so mixed martial arts, ran into a couple injuries or whatnot. Nick Rodriguez had some guys fighting out of his gym at Sword Summit Muay Thai, and that's when I was introduced to Brad Bennett and James Johnson. And I ended up kind of like I am now. I had an injury with my neck, and I knew that they specialized in exercise therapy, okay, and getting recovery. And we talked, and we're at the bar, and they're like, man, we'll help you out. We ain't gonna charge you nothing. We'll help you out. So, with the way they specialized in me and some of the other fighters, we ended up forming a group, and I learned so much about the human body. My body felt so different. My very next fight, after working with these guys for 2-3 months, I got a 17-second knockout because I was just that hyped up. And the guy had talked a lot of junk, and he didn't realize that when I first heard an interview about what he was going to do to Solon Staley, I was actually driving back from Pennsylvania. My uncle had just passed away. So I had a lot of fire up under me for that fight. And finished that fight or whatever, but that kind of solidified the relationship between Brad, James, Studio Fit, Mike Labrador, which I met his wife later down the road, because I was fighting at 145 pounds, but I was also working heat and air at this time, okay? So, and it's summertime, so I'm sweating all day long, working, attics, under houses, that sort of thing. If you work HVAC, you know what I'm talking about. Or if you know anybody who works HVAC, ask them. So by the time I got done with work and then with practice, like, I'm depleted. Like, I'm tired. I'm not holding my weight up. So there's no need to do a weight cut, but you're supposed to get big, drop down to a weight, and then get big again. Mike introduced me to his wife, who was a nutritionist, and then that's when I got my first nutrition plan. And when I got a nutrition plan, and I still yet today need to go back and put it in my fitness pal. I wasn't counting calories at that time. I was just making sure I followed the structure. And you can look this up. It's AFC, I think 24. It's on my YouTube. AFC 24 when I fought Dominique. No, it wasn't Dominique Mazzara. It was down in Florida, Coconut Creek, Florida. It's the AFC. But anyway, if you look at that fight, like, I was huge. I weighed in at 145, but by the time I recovered, I was almost 160 pounds. Okay, so I was big. I understood nutrition from a whole new prospect as far as on the athletic side. During that same time, I had an auntie who had went to the hospital because she had come down with, she was diagnosed with diabetes. Okay, excuse me. So that's when I went back to Shannon and learned about nutrition and learning about how diabetes mainly comes from an excess of not eating the correct type of nutrition, or eating too much of the incorrect nutrition, I should say it that way. And so I had to figure that out. And at the same time, my grandmother had been diagnosed with dementia, which I also learned was definitely related to sleep patterns and how you eat. My grandma's favorite thing to eat before she went to bed was 2 pieces of sunbeam white bread with butter, cut up slices of butter and cut up slices of cheddar. And she would have instant coffee and sugar in her coffee cup, and she would heat that up, boil the water, make her coffee, toast her I guess cheese and butter, and that's what she would eat before she went to bed. If I knew then what I know now, I never would have let her do that. My grandma woke up every day at 6 a.m. I know for a fact there was no way that she got the proper amount of sleep because she was taking caffeine, eating white bread, and the sugar in the coffee. So her brain definitely was not resting the way it needed to be at the time of sleep. and her body was trying to process the food that she just had. My grandma had dementia for 7 years. And the last 3 months of her life is when I was taking my personal training certification and my nutrition certification, because Mike set me down 3 years prior and told me that he thought I'd be great. I'd be a great member with Studio Fit, okay? Sorry. I mean, shit just happened, okay? Excuse my language. So, I spent the last 3 months in a reverse role with my grandma who helped raise me. So now, I'm the one at the stove. She's the one sitting at the table waiting to eat. And I would make her Kodiak cakes with blueberries in them to try to cut down on some of that inflammation from her just laying down and sitting down all the time. Understanding what I know about fascia now, if you don't break up the fascia, if you don't move, if you're not stretching, it's just going to get tight because it's a protective mechanism to protect your muscles. So I took her through some exercises. I helped her with her diet. But we had a caregiver that came in, and she ended up having the flu. And I'm going to say that she didn't know that she was sick. And my grandma ended up contracting the flu, and ultimately that's what took her out. My grandma went to the hospital, I want to say on that, I guess Friday or Saturday, and she was supposed to come home on that Monday. She passed away on Sunday. I sanitized the house, Lysol and everything just to make sure she didn't come back in anything. Excuse me. So, grandma passed on March 1st. The funeral was March 5th. I passed my National Academy of Sports Medicine certification on March 7th. COVID hit March 11th. So I was in the house that I grew up in without my mother, without my grandmother, and it was just sitting there. It's like I was still waiting on my grandma to come home. And we all went through the pandemic. And I know a lot of people lost their loved ones during the pandemic. Definitely sympathize with you. But my grandma passed right before the pandemic. And March 1st, and I want to say spring was right around the corner. I'm not sure exactly when spring started. Like I said, she passed March 1st, funeral was March 5th. I want to say spring was like right in that same week. And it's like, my grandma loved the outdoors. She loved flowers. She loved plants. She would water her plants a lot, all the time. She would make plant food. And when spring came, all those memories kind of came back. That same year, because of what I learned from watching my grandmother, I grew cucumbers, I grew spinach, I grew chard, I grew some watermelons, I grew some eggplants, I grew some early peas, and I attempted to grow potatoes, but I didn't know what I was doing, so that never happened. But anyway, I learned how to garden. Pandemic was going on. I watched a lot of documentaries about gardening and plants, and I did everything I could to try to keep her memory the way it was supposed to be. Keep the land like it was supposed to be. Keep the yard the way she would keep it. But anyway, 3 months later, that little boy that used to live behind my grandma decided that he didn't want me to stay in my grandma's house anymore. And I didn't know that it wasn't our land. I had absolutely no clue. And we're still, to this day, kind of going through that situation. But anyway, because of nutrition and what I know about personal training and what I know about people smoking, eating too many carbohydrates, eating too much saturated fat, not getting enough exercise, not moving enough, eating too much sugar, it is my absolute goal to reach as many people as I can. I know everybody ain't gonna look like me, in the video and whatnot. I get it. Genetics. But you have to take control of how you take care of yourself. Everybody want to get to the money. Ain't nothing wrong with getting to money. I'm in a job right now to where I know I'm not getting enough sleep. I'm an armed security officer. I work third shift. Okay? Cool. I'm finding ways to deal with that. And I'll deal with that until I can get up out of here. But you cannot overwork yourself to the point to where you're not getting your 8 hours of sleep. Because I'm fitting my 8 hours in there somewhere down the line. You can't work so much to where you don't have time for exercise. You can't work so much to where all you're eating is fast food. What I know about nutrition nowadays, it blows my mind when I see people, the line long as crap at McDonald's, long as crap at Burger King, long as crap at Wendy's, long as crap at Chick-fil-A. Chick-fil-A I kind of understand a little bit. Chick-fil-A, everybody understands Chick-fil-A. I get it, but still, there's moderation to everything. You got to understand yin yang. You got to understand energy. You got to understand balance. You have to understand that these ways that we're able to talk on our cell phones on aren't the only ways that we're able to communicate with each other. So what you're feeling now from what you're watching is real. It's up to you to make the change. That's my personal story. That's how I got here. Never in my life did I think I'd be a personal trainer or a nutritionist for that. I didn't even know any nutritionists. But now I understand that God made our bodies in a certain way. Balance is very key. And it says in the Bible that there's a time and place for everything. Stop not taking care of yourself. Because if you don't take care of your wellness, you will be forced to take care of your illness.